Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Homeopathy for Humanities Thursday night learning session, where we are continuing with Bönninghausen's lesser writings, where he wrote a very nice essay called A Contribution to the Judgment Concerning the Characteristic Value of Symptoms. He came to this after attending a homeopathic conference in Belgium, and he put in a competition. He said, why don't we make a competition of what makes a symptom characteristic and what we want to look for in case taking? And nobody answered the request. 2 years passed, and Bönninghausen had studied what would be a good reminder, and he then wrote up this essay that we are learning from over the last few weeks. So he found in Catholic religious writings the verse, quis quid ubi quibus exilius per quomodo quando. Now in Latin, this makes a little bit of a song, but I do not know the song. So these are what he calls rubrics in a maxim. And this gives us all the significant momenta to think about and remember as we sit down with the patient what we need to know. And so we start with, who is the patient? Quis, quid, what is wrong with the patient? Ubi, where are the problems? Quibus auxilius, what makes it better? That would be the concomitants. What goes along with it? Auxiliary, just like the word auxiliary, auxilius. Per, why? Quomodo, how? That gives us the modalities. So quomodo and quando rather go together. Today we are on the 7th one, quando. Quando means when. And then we can go back to the quomodo, and Bönninghausen says very nicely, but the quomodo with the quando generally solves the riddle of what the patient needs, the riddle of our case taking, the riddle of what do we do, which medicine do we give. So the quomodo and the quando generally solves the riddle in the most satisfactory manner, and not only removes every doubt, but also furnishes the proof for the solution, which we may have before supposed to be the right one. So what he's saying here is that when we combine the quomodo and the quando, when we combine the how and the when, it gives us perfect guidance for what we want to give our patients. So if we're thinking, let's say, to give belladonna, then we take the modality of time and the other general modalities, and we put those together, and then we are certain in our prescription. So the quomodo and the quando solves the riddle and makes us sure of our prescription. Okay, guys? Okay, so we need quando. Yep, there, just lost it.
Okay.
Okay, this last question, quando, concerns the time of the appearance of the aggravation or the improvement of the ailments, and follows the natural order of the preceding one being the regular modalities. Okay, and it's hardly of less importance in therapy than the last one. So he's saying that it's really just about as important. The time modalities are just about as important as the regular modalities of, let's say, motion or movement. And he also, it puts in that rubric of modality, he puts in there things like aversions and cravings and reactions to substances and food. etc. It's a rather broad one, but he says that it's very, very, very important. From the time of Hippocrates and his commentators up to our times, great attention has been bestowed on the periods of time in the various phases and stadia in the disease. The endeavor has been made to fix the period and continuance of the beginning of this increase, the acme, the decrease, and the end of the disease, which is interesting because that's very much removed from modern medicine. Modern medicine is not much interested in the beginning of the disease, the middle of the disease, and then the decline of the disease. It's just all about what are the symptoms presenting and how to quell those symptoms. That's what we basically do in modern medicine, is we quell symptoms. Instead of using them to our advantage, we tame them. Okay, but we're homeopaths, so we do something different. Okay, so the acme of the disease and the end of the disease. This would indeed make a useful contribution to the recognition and the characterization of the disease, but only in case it should be left altogether to itself and not be modified by medical interference. Here we have a very important statement. We can't really take modalities or time modalities, etc., when we have people that are taking allopathic drugs that destroy this information that the homeopath needs. It's very important. So if somebody has a fever, or they have coughing or whatnot, and they've been taking allopathy to suppress those symptoms, that is going to be destroyed. These time modalities, these characteristics that we need for our case taking are going to become vague because they have been interfered with. So when people take allopathy and then they come to us, we don't get a clear indication of the modalities that are so important to us. Okay, continuing. But on the other hand, it cannot be denied that this cannot give the least aid in the selection of the remedy, if only owing to the fact that the medicines cause disturbance in the natural course of the disease, which frequently lie together outside of all computation. Least of all can they be of any advantage to allopathic therapy, because it lacks all criteria from which to indicate one or the other. I hope that I may not, it's hard for me to read when you're scrolling the screen. I'm going to read my book. Excuse me, guys. Yeah, so allopaths are not able to use these time modalities because it doesn't give indications for their drugs, but these indications are given in a homeopathic proving. And Bönninghausen did give a special request to all homeopaths from this writing of this information on to record specifically the modalities encountered during a proving, as opposed to other things. He says, focus on the modalities because they are of extreme importance to us homeopaths. Okay. I hope that I may not hear the objection that the periodical return of a fever points to an actual or a disguised intermittent fever, and therefore indicates quinine in the various preparations, for we are not likely to find a homeopath who has not in his practice had to treat numerous victims of this error. Okay, so he's saying that when we think of an intermittent disease, we might be inclined to give quinine, and that would be an error, and then people need to be treated for the giving of quinine as well as having the disease. Homeopathy intends something quite different to this question, having nothing in common with what precedes. So we have no relevance to the allopathic mode of thinking when it comes to the time modalities. Therefore, we would not give quinine just because there's intermittency. Homeopathy attends something quite different. but it is concerned with two momenta which have an immediate effect on the choice of the remedies. A, the paradoxical return of morbid symptoms after a longer or shorter cessation, and when there are no symptoms, when the person's symptom free. And B, the aggravations and alleviations, which we would call ameliorations in our modern times, depending on the time of the day. These two will require but few words. Okay, so momenta. Momenta means movement. It means, the situation. So we have the return and the intervals, and then we have the aggravations and alleviations. The periodical return of morbid phenomena often coincides with periods of time, which carry with them particular occasional cause. Among these are to be numbered the menstrual ailments, as well as those which are conditioned by the seasons, the weather, etc. Okay, so he mentions menstruation when the lady has her period. So if the period is too short or too long, or there's too long a time between periods, for example, in bursitis, that can be a very long window between periods. Pink health might be too short, etc., etc. And then the weather, the seasons, people who are aggravated by the winter, people who are aggravated by the change of seasons from spring to summer or from fall to winter. And then, of course, there's the moon cycles. That is also a set of rubrics. Where such definite secondary causes cannot be discovered, and where there is mostly the case, the attacks are not closely bound to any sharply defined periods and have therefore no therapeutic value for homeopaths, as they lack the quality of a useful indication. But the greater importance are the aggravations and alleviations at particular times of the day, and this with respect to those which refer to a single symptom, as well as those which refer to the general health. Okay, so the single symptom is important, as is the general health. Some people feel better in the morning. Some people feel better at night. So that would be general. A specific symptom would be, let's say that, getting up in the morning is hard. They don't like to get out of bed, things like that. Okay, but of the greater importance, time of day, in this respect, homeopathy possesses a great and valuable treasury of well-proved experiences, which are being more and more enlarged by careful observations. And this is where we get clinical rubrics from, guys. The careful observations that happen during treatment. People record these things and share with others. And many of these things have been compiled over time. For example, we can see the change in the compilations between, let's say, Materia Medica Pura and the chronic disease provings and Herring's guiding symptoms. We see that there have been enlarged by careful observations and by additional provings. For there is hardly any disease, from the malignant internal fevers down to local ailments, in which during the different times of the day there does not manifest itself a more or less decided and distinct aggravation or alleviation. Now, since homeopaths have learned these particularities also in the various medicines during their provings on healthy persons, they are enabled to make extensive and blessed use of this particularity in their therapeutics. And they are obliged to do this in order that they may satisfy the rule simila similibus, also in this respect. To demonstrate the proceeding of some of the special facts, I will only adduce here the importance which time of the day has on coughs and respect to the expectoration, what one coughs up, as well as with respect to the greater ease at which it is discharged, also the consistency and the taste. Bönninghausen has another essay all about the taste of expectoration and the color of expectoration. It's a very long essay with a lot of different details. It's a good one. Okay, something similar we know about the stools. And though most of the remedies have diarrhea among their indications, so far as we know, only two, conium and calicarb, where this takes place only by day and not by night. See, there's a time modality, by day and not by night. With respect to the ailments which have a typical return, independent of other causes, we have a considerable series of remedies corresponding to this, without on the account excluding others, when they are indubitably indicated for their symptoms. Only in cases where this return is sharply and definitely pronounced, as for example in the evening at the same hour, in the evening from 4 to 8 o'clock. Everybody thinks about lycopodium from 4 to 8, but 4 to 8 can also belong to hellebores. Or exactly at the same hour, antimonium crudum, ignatia, and sabadilla. So, for example, if somebody has a return of symptoms at the same hour every day, we would look at antimonium crudum, ignatia, and sabadilla. We should give it a special importance and only be careful that there may be no contraindications. So the whole case needs to fit properly. I conclude these contributions, which I have only hastily sketched down, with the hope that I may have succeeded in putting into the true light the difference between allopathy and homeopathy, and to incite my colleagues on their part to treat these important themes at more length, even if this be done only with respect to some one of the questions indicated at the time. Okay. What do we have to say about that?
You saw that PowerPoint file.
Can you bring up the sample of time modalities from Boger for me, please? Can you make it big so we can read it? Here we just have a basic sample from Boger's general analysis. 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. You bring it up just a little bit bigger so we can read what remedies are in. Let's say spring. Can you zone in on spring and hot weather? Okay, so spring, allium cepa, ambra, belladonna, bryonia, calc, calc phos, calc carb V, crotalis, gelsemium, calibichromicum, lachesis, Tox, sarsaparilla, and veratrum all have the time modality of spring. But this is what Bönninghausen's talking about, like the 1 a.m., which is actually, people say after midnight for arsenicum, but it's specifically as well in 1 a.m., 2 a.m., instead of just after midnight. And 1 a.m. has arsenicum, carbovegetabilis, magmir, and pulsatilla. So let's say if people wake up every night at 1 a.m., then we would put these remedies under consideration. Or if they wake at 2 a.m., or if there's a problem at noon. So this is just some samples of time modalities. 9 p.m. belongs to our arsenicum. Noon, argentum, eupatorium, nux.
What time did you say for arsenicum?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of different times noted here in Boger for arsenicum. There's 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Then when we get to 4 a.m., it's no longer mentioned. The type is so small over here that I'm having a very hard time reading it. And it's also just general after night. And then it's not in midnight until, because we know it's after midnight, right?
So why is it at 9 p.m.? If it's after midnight?
Yeah, because I guess that these are also indications in the proving data
Hmm.
or in clinical, what's it called? Clinical, what would you call those, Sanjay?
Clinical.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about the remedies within these rubrics?
Which one?
Any? Choose something to talk about a little bit.
A minute. What we can say? Time
We can say that
modality.
it's very, we can say that it's very important to ask the person what their, when things get better, when things get worse, and to try to pinpoint that.
There are many remedies which aggravates or ameliorates during specific time, during specific hour, and everything we can see night aggravation, morning aggravation, afternoon aggravation, or amelioration, and lot of remedies. As you have said, see, we can see this 8 a.m. to noon, night 10 a.m. again night. Night specific modality we see is during daytime. Is along with the sun. It aggravates with the sun. It's sunset. After sunset, we see its amelioration. Anything else?
Yep. Yeah, but we can remember that Bönninghausen says that we put the Quomodo with the Quando, it will answer our needs.
Okay. What more we can add toward this? Anything else?
Yep, we've done a really good read through of this
You
essay
say?
by Bönninghausen.
Everyone? Hello. Too short part today.
too short for you?
Yeah. I don't know where it's recording. It's recording in my computer, whether it is recording on your computer.
I have a recording here. I do. Okay, so I guess we have finished up the concerning characteristic value of symptom by Bönninghausen. And thank you very much for joining us once again. And then we'll have to figure out what we're going to do next Thursday.
We will announce
Thank you.
in two short parts and last part. It's characteristics, symptoms of Bönninghausen.
Yep,
Thank
thank
you,
you for
guys.
joining us.
Thank you so much.
There it's recording.